Have you ever sat at your kitchen table, cup of tea cooling in your hands, and wondered why the house felt so quiet? Maybe you found out about a family gathering through someone else? Or maybe your kids shared photos from a weekend get-together, and you weren't in a single one. It's a strange kind of ache, that quiet question. Did they forget me? Or am I just not part of their lives anymore? If you've ever felt that, you're not alone. So many people in their 60s, 70s, and beyond have moments like that. Not because they're dramatic or needy, but because life has shifted. And sometimes, families forget that the people who held them up for years still need to feel included, valued, wanted. But here's the thing, they often don't mean to leave us out. Life moves fast for them, just like it did for us once. Kids, jobs, errands, stress. Sometimes they forget. And sometimes we assume the worst instead of starting a conversation. In this video, we're talking about that feeling left out by family, and more importantly, what to say and what not to say when it happens. Because the words we choose can open doors or slam them shut. Let's start with something gentle. Let's say your daughter planned a birthday party for your grandchild, and you weren't invited. Your instinct might be to say, I guess I'm not welcome anymore, or even, you never think of me. But here's something to consider. Those words can come across like an accusation, and when people feel accused, they get defensive. They stop listening. Instead, try this. I saw the pictures from the party. It looked like such a lovely day. I would have loved to be there. Maybe next time? It's calm. It's kind. And it invites them to do better without making them feel attacked. You're expressing your hurt, but in a way that builds the bridge rather than burns it. And let's be honest, sometimes the silence hurts more than anything. So what do you do when they don't call? When no one checks in? That's when it's easy to slip into sarcasm or guilt tripping. Things like, well, I guess I only exist when you need a babysitter, or glad to know I'm still alive in your phone book. It might feel satisfying in the moment. But does it really help? Most times, it pushes people further away. Instead, you might say something like, I miss our chats. Is there a good time this week to catch up? You're showing them that you care. You're making space for connection, and you're setting a tone of love, not guilt. Another tricky one is when you are excluded from decisions. Maybe your son made a big life choice, moved cities, changed jobs, even made medical decisions for your grandchild, and didn't tell you until it was done. That kind of exclusion stings, especially when you've spent decades guiding and supporting your family. But before saying something like, why am I the last to know? Consider asking, I just found out about the move. How are you feeling about it? Or, I'd love to understand more about what led to the decision. That way, you're creating a space for dialogue, not defensiveness. And through that space, they just might remember why they always turned to you in the first place. Sometimes, being left out makes us question everything. We start wondering if we're even needed anymore. That's when the thoughts get heavy and the urge to shut down grows stronger. You might feel tempted to say, I don't want to be a burden, or maybe it's better if I just stay out of the way. But those statements aren't neutral. They send a signal that you're retreating, that you're giving up on the relationship. And more often than not, your family will hear that as emotional withdrawal, sometimes even manipulation. So instead, try vulnerability. It's powerful. Say, lately, I've been feeling a little out of the loop, and it's hard. I'd love to feel more connected to you. That might feel raw to say, but it's also real. And realness, when spoken with care, brings people closer. At this point, you might be thinking, but what if they don't respond well? What if they still forget? That fear is valid. Not every conversation will go perfectly. But here's something I want you to hold on to. Just because someone stumbles in how they treat you doesn't mean your worth is diminished. Setting healthy, loving boundaries and expressing your feelings clearly is a way of honoring yourself. And even if the response isn't what you hoped for, you'll know you showed up with grace and clarity. As we continue, we'll talk about even more ways to keep those relationships healthy without losing yourself in the process. Because you matter. Your presence matters. And there are ways to express that without bitterness. Only strength and heart. Let's keep going. Now, let's talk about something that might sound familiar. You've probably had a moment where you heard about a family decision after it was made. Maybe where to spend the holidays, or who's watching the grandkids, or even something as small as a dinner plan. And your name just never came up. It stings, doesn't it? Not because you want control, but because being part of the conversation makes you feel like you still belong. In moments like this, it's so easy to let frustration bubble up and come out as something like, "No one tells me anything anymore," or "I guess I'm invisible." It might feel like a fair statement, especially if it's happened more than once. But to the person on the other end, it can sound like blame, like you're building a wall instead of a bridge. Try something simpler instead, more open and less loaded. Something like, "I didn't know about the plan. I'd love to be included next time if possible." What that does is communicate your desire without implying wrongdoing. And often, people don't even realize they've left someone out until it's pointed out gently. Now, let's flip the coin. What if you're always invited, but it feels like you're more of an afterthought than a participant? Maybe they say, "Of course you're welcome," but then ignore your ideas, or talk over you, or leave you to clean up. That too can leave you feeling pushed aside, even when you're technically in the room. In those cases, words like, "You don't value me," or "You treat me like the help," might sit at the tip of your tongue. But again, those phrases close the conversation. They don't invite change. What can you say instead? Maybe try, "I really enjoy spending time with everyone, but I'd also love to feel like I'm part of the fun, not just the logistics." That tells them you want to engage more deeply without making it a confrontation. And that kind of honesty, when said without bitterness, can really stick with people. Now let's address a tough situation. Sometimes the feeling of being left out isn't about invitations or conversations. It's about emotional distance. Maybe your son doesn't call much anymore, or your daughter seems distracted every time she visits. They're polite, sure, but the warmth feels like it's cooled. In those cases, the temptation might be to withdraw or to say something like, "Well, I guess you don't care anymore." But those words usually spark guilt, not reconnection. Instead, try reaching for curiosity over criticism. A simple, "Is everything okay? I've been sensing a little distance, and I just want to check in," can open a door that might have been quietly closed. People pull away for all sorts of reasons: stress, life changes, even their own guilt about not doing enough. But when you approach them with care, not accusation, they're more likely to lean in instead of pull further away. Of course, there's another layer here. Something that doesn't get talked about enough. It's that sense of identity loss when your role in the family changes. For decades, you may have been the planner, the caregiver, the go-to person. Now, suddenly, things run without you. That shift can feel like fading into the background of your own story. And in that emotional fog, you might want to say things like, "Everything's changed. I don't even know my place anymore." That's a heavy feeling. And while it's okay to express sadness, it's also powerful to reframe it. You might say instead, "I know the family's grown and life looks different now, but I still love feeling connected. Let me know how I can be part of things in this season." That kind of statement acknowledges change while also asserting your desire to stay involved. It doesn't beg, it invites. The truth is, your voice matters. And sometimes, all it takes to remind people of that is for you to use it. Not with sharp edges, but with honesty and heart. Before we close this part of the conversation, let me leave you with this thought. Relationships, especially with family, are living things. They grow, change, and sometimes stretch thin. But they can also be tended to, healed, and strengthened again, often with just a few kind, brave words. Sometimes, Healing starts not with a grand gesture, but with a small pause. The moment you decide not to say something hurtful, even though it's aching in your throat. And then you say something gentler instead. That's how bridges are built. Word by word, moment by moment. Let's take another scenario that might sound familiar. Imagine your family's gathered for a celebration, maybe a birthday, a holiday, or just a weekend meal. The kids are talking amongst themselves, your adult grandchildren are laughing at jokes you don't quite get, and you're sitting there with your coffee, wondering when you became part of the furniture instead of the conversation. It's not always on purpose. Sometimes families fall into patterns. The grown-ups you raised now have their own families, their own worries, and their own distractions. But even knowing that, the silence can still feel loud. It can still hurt. In those moments, you might feel tempted to say something like, "I guess no one wants to talk to me anymore," or, "Don't worry, I'll just sit here quietly like I always do." And while those words are honest in their hurt, they can sound passive-aggressive. They can push people away right when what you really want is to be pulled in. Try this instead. Gently invite yourself in. Say, "That sounds like a fun story. Can you catch me up?" Or, "Mind if I join this conversation? I'd love to hear more." Most people don't mean to exclude, they just forget to include. And your voice, spoken with warmth instead of woundedness, can be the reminder they didn't know they needed. Now, let's talk about another kind of moment. One that's not about being left out physically or emotionally, but financially. Maybe you notice that when gifts are exchanged, your presence is appreciated, but your contributions are assumed. Or when money's discussed, college funds, vacation plans, emergency needs, you're either not consulted or only called when they need something. This is delicate. Money and family always are. It's easy to feel used or undervalued, and it's tempting to say something like, "I'm not your ATM," or, "Funny how I only hear from you when you need help." That frustration is valid. But again, those words can shut down a conversation instead of opening one up. Consider this approach. I'm always glad to help when I can, but I'd love to feel involved in the bigger picture too, not just when things are urgent. That lets them know your support is still there, but that you want mutual respect, not just reactive requests. Another point we often overlook is how being left out can stir up old feelings. Maybe you were always the dependable one, the peacemaker, the one who didn't ask for much. And now, in later life, it feels like that role never changed. Except now, it just means being forgotten. These patterns go deep, and it's okay to acknowledge them. But instead of rehashing old grievances with lines like, "No one ever appreciated me," try something like, "I've always tried to be the steady one in the family, and I hope I still matter in that role." That doesn't erase the pain, but it expresses your truth in a way that's more likely to be heard. Let's also touch on something that may feel hard to admit: resentment. It's real. It builds up when you feel overlooked too many times. And if you're not careful, it can come out in ways that sound more like bitterness than clarity. If you're at that point, it might help to write it down first, what you'd like to say. Sit with it. Ask yourself, do I want to be right, or do I want to be close? Because often, those two things aren't the same. The goal isn't to silence your hurt. It's to shape it into something that connects instead of divides. Saying, "It really matters to me when I feel included, even in small ways," is simple but powerful. It leaves room for repair. And remember, you don't always need to be the one fixing things. It's okay to say, "I'd like to talk about something that's been on my heart." That's not weakness, that's courage. Before we pause here, I want you to take this in. Feeling left out doesn't mean you're unlovable. It doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes it just means the people you love need a gentle reminder of who you are, how much life, wisdom, and care you still bring to the table. You don't have to shout to be heard, but you do have to speak. And when you do, When you reach for connection instead of conflict, you give your family a chance to meet you where you are, not where they've left you behind. Let's sit with this truth for a moment, one that can be hard to admit. Sometimes, when we're feeling left out, it's not because we're invisible, it's because we've stopped asking to be seen. Not in a dramatic way, not in a look at me kind of way, but in the quiet, essential way that says, I'm still here, I still matter. There's a phrase many of us fall into when we're hurt. Don't worry about me. On the surface, it sounds kind, selfless even, but underneath, it's often hiding a wound, a sense that if we don't shrink ourselves, we'll be seen as needy or dramatic, so we fade a little. Stay quiet. We make it easier for others to forget we have needs too. But here's what I want you to hear right now, like it's being said just to you. You don't have to earn your place in the family by disappearing. Instead of, don't worry about me, try something more honest. Something like, I'd love to be part of this too. It's soft, it's open, and it invites them to lean in instead of pull away. There's another tricky moment that often comes up around decisions, big or small. Maybe your children make a plan that involves your home, your time, even your help. But no one asked if you were okay with it. You're told, not consulted. And that can feel like your voice, your role, has been erased. It's easy in that moment to react with frustration. You never ask what I think, or why bother including me now? But let's try flipping that script. What if instead you said, I'd feel a lot more respected if we could talk about these things together? You're not accusing, you're inviting respect. Here's a small but powerful sentence that can change an entire conversation. I want to feel like I still have a say. Say it gently. Say it with eye contact, and watch how differently it lands. Sometimes feeling left out isn't about what people are doing, it's about what they're not noticing. The way they talk over you at dinner, the way they make plans without asking what you want, the way they forget your stories before you've even finished telling them. When those moments pile up, the ache can become a quiet kind of grief. You might think, maybe they just don't care anymore. But often it's not that. It's just that the rhythm of life moves so fast, and unless someone slows it down, they miss what matters most. You can be the one who slows it down. One of the most disarming things you can say when you're feeling forgotten is this. Can I tell you something that's been on my mind? It's not blaming. It's not dramatic. It's just a door. And doors, when opened with honesty, often invite others to walk through. Another phrase that builds bridges instead of walls is, it means a lot to me when you include me. That's it. No long explanation. No guilt. Just a simple truth that lets them know how deeply you still want to be part of their lives. Now let's talk about what not to say. And I want to be gentle here, because these are things we've all said at some point, especially when the hurt feels fresh. Try to avoid phrases like, you've changed, or you never used to treat me this way. Those words tend to put people on the defensive. Instead of opening a conversation, they close it before it starts. Also be careful with sarcasm. Comments like, well, I wouldn't know, no one tells me anything, or guess I'm just the forgotten parent, may feel like small jabs, but they cut deeper than you think. And most of the time, they don't lead to understanding. They lead to silence. Instead, lead with vulnerability. Lead with clarity. Say, I miss being part of the inside circle, or I've been feeling a little left behind lately, and I don't want that to come between us. That level of honesty is disarming. It draws people toward you, not away. There's also power in asking questions, not to guilt, but to understand. Is there something I've done that's made you pull back? Is a brave question. It shows you're willing to listen, not just speak. And sometimes, that question alone is enough to open a door you didn't know was closed. Finally, I want to leave you with this. Relationships evolve, but love doesn't have to disappear. You are allowed to want more. More connection. More closeness. more respect. That desire doesn't make you weak, it makes you human. Speak your heart, not just your hurt. When you do that, you give your family the chance to see you clearly again. And sometimes, that's all it takes to change everything. Let's take a breath here, together. Because what we're talking about isn't easy. It's about the quiet ache that comes when you feel like you're watching life from the sidelines instead of living it with the people you love most. There's one moment many people over 60 have experienced, but rarely talk about. The moment you realize your family's rhythm no longer centers around you. Holidays are hosted elsewhere. Grandkids don't call as much. Plans are made, and you hear about them secondhand. Or not at all. You sit in that silence and wonder if this is just what aging is supposed to feel like. But here's the truth. It doesn't have to be. Let's talk about something that can gently shift that dynamic. Something you can say, even when your heart feels heavy. Imagine sitting with your daughter or son and simply saying, "I love being part of your world. When I'm left out, it feels like I don't matter." Notice that you're not accusing, you're sharing. You're being honest without shame. That one sentence, it plants a seed. It lets them know you still want to belong. And it works because it comes from a place of love, not guilt, not anger. Most adult children aren't trying to leave their parents behind. They're just overwhelmed with their own lives. Kids, bills, jobs, stress. Sometimes they assume you're fine. But if they don't know what you're feeling, they can't change how they treat you. Now let's talk about what happens when emotions run high. Maybe you've just been left out of a vacation or family gathering. Maybe they didn't even tell you it was happening. You feel blindsided, forgotten. The words that bubble up first are probably sharp. "I guess I'm not invited." Or, "Nice to know where I rank." It's okay to feel that way. But instead of saying those things, try this. "Can I share how that felt for me?" It's simple, but it invites conversation, not conflict. And that's what you want. Connection, not distance. Here's something else to consider. Sometimes we unintentionally teach others how to treat us. If we constantly say, "It's okay, I don't need anything," even when we do need something, eventually they believe us. They stop checking in. They assume we're fine. And we feel more alone than ever. It's not weakness to say, "I'd love it if you visited more often," or "It would mean a lot to be part of the planning." Those statements are bridges, quiet ones, but they matter. You may also find yourself tempted to test your family. Maybe you stop calling to see if they'll notice. Maybe you drop hints instead of saying what's on your heart. But most of the time, those tests backfire. People miss the hints. They don't know you're waiting. And that disappointment builds. Instead of testing, try trusting. Trust that your honesty is enough. That saying, "I've been feeling a little disconnected lately. Can we talk about that?" won't push them away. It'll pull them closer. And if it doesn't, that tells you something important. It tells you where the work needs to begin. One of the most powerful things you can say to an adult child is, "I want a relationship with you." Not out of obligation, but out of real connection. That line is like oxygen to a conversation. It lifts the pressure. It reminds them you're not asking to be pitied. You're asking to be present in their life. Now, let's talk briefly about emotional boundaries. Because while it's okay to express your feelings, it's also okay to protect your heart. If your efforts to connect are constantly ignored or minimized, you have a right to say, "I love you deeply, but I also need to take care of myself. I can't keep chasing something that doesn't want me back." That's not giving up. That's preserving your peace. On the other hand, if your honesty sparks change, even small ones, celebrate them. A phone call, an invitation, a text that says, "Hey, I was thinking of you." These are signs of love taking root again. Water those moments. Say, That meant a lot to me. Let them know they're doing something right. Relationships aren't static. They shift, grow, stretch, and sometimes break a little before they find their strength again. But when you show up with honesty, not anger, with clarity, not shame, with invitation, not demand, you give your family the chance to meet you halfway. And more often than not, they will. Because deep down, your children do want to love you well. They just need to be reminded how. So the next time you feel left out, remember this. Your voice still matters. Your needs still matter. And the way back into connection isn't paved with silence, it's paved with brave small truths. You don't have to shout. You don't have to beg. You just have to speak the kind of words that invite someone to stop, listen, and say, I didn't realize, but I'm glad you told me.